Shalom and welcome again to another edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast of Jewish Sacred Aging. I'm your host, Rabbi Richard Address. These podcasts hope to explore issues that touch us and our families in light of the revolution on longevity that is reshaping our communities and our Jewish world. And we appreciate your support. You can follow us on our webpage, our homepage, www.jewishsacredaging.com, and also visit us at the Facebook page, Jewish Sacred Aging on Facebook. We are very happy to welcome back, actually for a return visit. It's been a few months, to Rosemary Lloyd, the Faith Community Advisor to the Conversation Project, to discuss something that is ongoing and frankly, which is really where I want to start with. This pandemic has become even more topical and present in people's lives, and that is having that conversation about one's wishes as life begins to ebb. Rosemary, good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us here.
Great to be back.
It's nice to see you, and I'm lots to talk about. I guess the easiest, most obvious question is to ask you to just walk us through very, very briefly, in case there's somebody who really has not yet heard of the Conversation Project, and also what's been the experience with this pandemic, because we're seeing, lawyers tell us more and more people are coming to them to redo their wills. People of my generation, older adults, really having some concerns about, how long this is going to last, and how much in danger I am. So walk us through what the Conversation Project is and some of the reactions as a result of the pandemic.
Sure. The Conversation Project is a nonprofit organization that is housed within a larger organization called the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. What we do is we develop tools, education, community support to help people talk about what matters most to them when it comes to the care through the end of life. So we all know that it feels like it's always too soon to talk about the fact that we are going to die someday. But we know that it just seems like it's too soon. It's always too soon until it's too late. So we try to get people engaged earlier, having conversations more often about what matters most about living and how that would inform what kind of care you would want if you were threatened with a serious, chronic, terminal illness. And you ask about COVID, and it's really highlighted for us. It's like putting a yellow highlighter through the importance of having these conversations, because boy, did this come out of seemingly nowhere. And suddenly there were so many unknowns. Who really was most affected? How badly would we be affected? And with this particular disease, we end up in a position of not being able to communicate for ourselves about what we want in terms of care that we'd like to receive or care we wouldn't want to receive, because you don't have the breath to speak. So that's what we try to encourage, is for people to talk with people who might be in a position of making decisions on your behalf. People who you live with, people who matter most to you, your healthcare providers, so that decisions could be made that were in conjunction with what your wishes are, what your beliefs are, what your values and traditions are. And we tried to jump on this pretty quickly with a new tool. So if you were to go to theconversationproject.org, our website, you would find a variety of tools to help you have conversations. And there's a specific one related to COVID-19, because we more than ever need to think about having our healthcare proxy or agent assigned, durable power of attorney for healthcare. Different things are named in different states. And also giving people a little bit of background that was available at the time that we developed the tool, some additional considerations you might need to weave in as you think about your wishes, given this particular disease and the course that it was taking or is taking in terms of your lungs and your capacity to breathe and the kind of care you might need.
So again, the website is, what is it?
The theconversationproject.org.
And it's
and
one,
there you one long thing altogether. And you will find there tools to help you have conversations with your loved ones, with your doctors, with your family. We have specific tools for talking about people people who have a person with Alzheimer's in their family or other forms of dementia, specialized tools. And we have organizing tools that can help you in your community, in your congregation, organize people to talk together. Because sometimes we really want to practice this with people we know or are social with before we actually talk with our family members.
So, what on the website, the most difficult question, without any stretch of the imagination, is, um, yeah, I really should do this, but I don't even know how to get the conversation started. So, if I go to conversationproject.org, is there going to be a little how to get the conversation started?
Yes, there's a free conversation starter kit that you
No.
can download anytime. Take a look at it online. Um, Fill it out online if you want to. Print it out from your home printer. And it's got little exercises. It's got some statistics that help you think about the issue in the first place. But it's got actual questions to ask yourself or to ask somebody else and tips on how to deal with talking to the people in your life when you get some pushback. In fact, we have a couple of humorous videos that give you some tips on a good way to start the conversation and maybe a not so great way to have the conversation. And humor can be a way to break the ice.
Talk to us a little bit about, as you deal with congregations across the denominational line, the fear factor. The fear factor in the sense of, if I really talk about this, I'm really admitting I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And so maybe I would really not like to talk about it. Have you ever run
Or,
into that?
oh, once or twice, Rabbi, once or twice. I
It's not
mean, those great lines, I'm not afraid of death. I just don't want to be there when it happens,
one of the great
or
Woody Allen line. I think it's from Annie Hall, actually.
yeah. Or, I know death is going to happen. I just thought I was going to be the exception. And we're not. So when I do work with people in congregations or coach clergy on bringing this topic up in a sermon or as a workshop at their congregation, I encourage the perspective that this is a profoundly spiritual conversation. To embrace the reality of your mortality is requires maturity, requires an ability to look deep into your soul, literally, and find out what matters to you, and the fact that you're mortal. And the arc of the longer conversation is, or the punchline is, it's all about living a better life. I say all the time, and I know you do too, when we contemplate the reality of our mortality, when we come face to face with that, we can't help but want to live the life we have been given today and rejoice and be glad in it, right? If it's going to end, do I want to procrastinate? Or do I want to make sure that today is the day I say, I'm sorry? If I think this is my day, this is my opportunity to say, I love you, right? Please forgive me. I forgive you. I mean, these things, century to say, be able to say these words would indicate that we have some sort of completion with every day of our life. So that's what I see in congregations. But is there fear still? Of
Mm-hmm.
course. Of course. Um, there may be so much left undone, whether it's, wanting to see your child grow up or a grandchild married or clean out your closets. I don't know whatever's on your list of from the most superficial to the most profound. We don't want to lose those opportunities. So there's fear there. There are also sort of something wired in us, superstition. If we talk about it, it might happen sooner. I know I've run into that a lot of times. It's like the sex conversation we used to have with, about we can't talk to our kids about sex education or they might have it, but we found out that this is actually a better idea. They're better prepared. The same thing here. We're going to be better prepared. And who doesn't want to be prepared on their last day? to face that moment without fear, without regrets. This takes planning. It takes forethought. It takes reflection, and that's what you and I are up to, I think, along with so many other colleagues and friends.
The on the website with all the tools and forms, etc. How do you handle, or don't you, the various religious traditions? Because obviously, from the Jewish perspective, there's Jewish advanced directives across the denominational lines. Um, so, if I'm coming to the Conversation Project and want that embrace, is it there, or do I take the forms and then I go to my clergy person and get the sort of like the denominational interpretation?
Yes, that's actually the second is what we do. We're a secular organization that honors the fact that people have rich spiritual lives. Many people come from, well, we all come from different cultural, ethnic, religious backgrounds, right? That these things all inform us, and there's no way we could possibly have put in all those things. So we ask kind of broader questions that are shaped like, what supports you in times of struggle? Where do you draw support from? And prompts might include my family, my faith, my pet, even. People get support from different places. So yes, these are more general, like, think about what matters to you, and then of course we can't possibly comment on the various teachings within Judaism or Christianity or Islam or any other religion. You need to, but we do want you to prepare yourself to honor that in yourself and bring that to the conversation, because it's crucial. And unfortunately, your healthcare provider is not always going to be primed to think about that when they're talking to you. So you have to, as an individual, think, wait, this is really important to me. I want to make sure you know about this. So whether it's preparing to die or how you want to deal with my body after I die, please know these important things and contact these people, especially now in the time of COVID. You need to communicate that.
We're speaking with Rosemary Lloyd, Reverend Rosemary Lloyd, the faith community advisor to the Conversation Project. Rosemary, you just alluded to something that the more I am involved in this work, the more this is becoming really, really evident and a real challenge, I would imagine. Um, Access into the varieties of communities, religious, ethnic communities that make up the United States of America. So, have you noticed, or has the Conversation Project done any studies of the amount of access and or acceptance, let's say, between Caucasian communities, African American communities, Latino communities, Asian communities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because the country's so diverse, and not every community from my work has the same relationship with the medical community, medical technology, and these types of conversations. Have you run into this? And how, if so, how is the Conversation Project dealing with this?
Yeah, certainly. There's no way that any one organization is going to reach into every community. So we partner with lots of different groups across the country, because we know that we talk to we talk to ourselves. We feel comfortable together talking with people who are like us, or people that we gather with on a regular basis, week to week. So we try to encourage. We look for champions throughout the country, people who will be prepared to bring this work into their community. So early on, when I was reaching out to congregations in Boston, one of the first congregations I worked with was Bethel Ame Church, which is a African American population, a Black community. And, it wasn't that I wanted to be the person who said, here's how you do it. I wanted to go in there and say, this is the work I'm doing. Would this be useful in your community? And if so, how could we bring it into your community? So we had a pilot project of my presenting with the introduction of the lead pastor, who's Black, a Black woman, and saying, Rosemary's going to do this, and then we're going to talk about how we want to do it. And that's what happened. I led a conversation project workshop. We did a follow-up session with 40 people. They were amazed at how much people were hungry to talk about this in their communities, because they felt like, I mean, over and over I heard, my son won't talk to me. My mother won't talk to me. We need to talk about this with grandma. But no one was opening the conversation. Well, that congregation, that pastor heard the message loud and clear. And she said, we're going to keep this conversation going until everyone in our congregation has had that conversation. That was 6 years ago. And they continue to offer this 3 times a year to small pods of people who gather together, have the conversation, think about their wishes, fill out their advance directives, and then share with the larger community that they've completed this work, because they talk to their doctor too. And they celebrate people. The Chinese American community, I'll say it, we're a bunch of nice white women. Originally, that's what it was. But we want to find partners. And we found partners in the Chinese American community. We find partners in lots of different communities. I will tell you something that's kind of interesting. It was interesting to me from the very beginning in terms of uptake of this work, like what communities were really eager to do it. Fully 30% of the congregations I worked with were Jewish. Primed, ready, willing, eager to have this conversation. So that for a long time was sort of the group that I was working with the most. I was working with rabbis quite a bit. But then gradually national organizations like CTAC, for example, or national chaplain organizations would come through and say, let's give us the materials, and then we want to take it and make sure it works for our community. And that's actually, right now we have some wonderful funding from the John A. Hartford Foundation to extend our reach, to find more champions to work together so that our tools can be reviewed by a very diverse group and ensure that we're talking to people in a way that can be heard.
And with the forms on the conversationproject.org, the website,
Mm-hmm.
The focus has always been, advanced planning, end of life, et cetera, et cetera. But do you incorporate in those forms or in the conversations or in these workshops, not only developing a plan for end of life, but a care plan? In other words, because caregiving it's still the number one workshop that we get asked to do in Jewish sacred aging. And because so many more people are involved in caregiving over a longer period of time, sometimes decades, has the project begun to look at or developing, care plan work? Here's who's going to be responsible for this. Here's who's going to take that responsibility. Here's going to come in and do this. And has this become part of the conversation project?
Not specifically the conversation project, but within the larger organization of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, we have a lot of work going on for seniors, for older Americans, healthy aging approaches, but also care for the caregiver and caregiving plans. I think that these things all have to go hand in hand. We may not be able to do all this for everyone, but being partners with other groups that are focusing on this, I think is very important. I would say that the conversation, or having these kinds of conversations, prepares you for all those kinds of conversations.
Right.
We have to keep talking about these things and what matters. But yes, when it comes, it's you and I, I've been a caretaker for my parents, and I know that that's probably, talking about your dying, in some ways, frankly, is easier than talking about how will we get from this place of now we have a diagnosis, or now we've come to a critical moment, and getting from there through the caretaking is deeply challenging.
And spiritually challenging too. It's one of the great spiritual abysses in many cases, both positive and negative. And every time we do one of these workshops, there's stories that come out about, I lost my faith, or no, in caring these years with my parent or whoever, I found my faith renewed, and I was able to put away hostilities or hurts, etc. And it's just a fascinating journey.
Certainly.
One of the things that we keep running into, and I'm anxious to, I want to ask you about this, is more and more of our generation, my generation, baby boomers are more open to having this conversation, even with the pandemic. That's been a spark. But how has the Conversation Project begun to reach out to our children's generation, the Gen Xers, who they're hopefully going to be caring for us, but these are people in their 30s and 40s, perhaps even early 50s, who they're on the pardon my baseball imagery, but they're in the on deck circle. They're up next, and
Mhm.
have you found that they're more open to having these conversations, or you're still getting that, oh, Dad, you're going to live for a long time, we don't want to deal with it?
The answer is yes, and it depends. We are seeing younger people more engaged. At the Conversation Project, we actually had a campaign to reach out to college students, really
Wow.
wanting to get college students talking about this with an awareness that when you leave home and you're 18 years old or 21 years old and leave home, your parents are no longer automatically your have access to your healthcare decision making. You could have
Right, right.
appendicitis or fall off your bike or skateboard at college and hit your head, and your parents could call and say, "I need to talk about my son." They're like, "Are you his healthcare proxy? His healthcare agent? We can't release that information." It's terrible. That's a terrible thing when that happens. But trying to get college students to think about this. People who are involved with their raising young children, it's pretty hard to still get their attention, but you get to be about 40 or 50, or if they've been through it once or been through it with a grandparent, they're much more open to talking about it. I've been astonished. One of our partners is an organization called Reimagine, and it's Let Reimagine End of Life. And they do festivals in San Francisco and New York City. A week long, well, before the virus, they were doing events all over the city: theater, dance, comedy, death over dinner parties, conversation project workshops, all Hevra Kadisha workshops, just all kinds of things to bring this to the city's attention. And who's coming to those? Young people. I mean, people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, who I think part of it was this search for meaning, right, that we talk about all the time, where they are maybe separated from their root traditions, their root faith traditions, and they're so hungry for meaning. Something about talking about end of life seems to really get in there and touch that place in their hearts that is longing to find meaning.
Speaking of meaning, I know in your bio you've had training in meditation and stuff like that. And what I'm also beginning to find out is, and I think even before the pandemic, but I'm seeing a little, I think, a rise in this with the pandemic, of people really trying to deal with some of these issues, end of life issues, especially when I can't get to the assisted living facility or the nursing home or the hospital. I can't go to see this person. It builds the stress up. An increasing number of people turning to mindfulness and meditation as a way of dealing with not only the stress and strains of life, but also, I think, trying to come in contact with this reality of one's own mortality. Could you just speak to this, of whether you're seeing an increase of this in your work?
I see it certainly in my family. I have a bunch of grandchildren, and I'm seeing in the teenagers and the college level kids some more interest in meditation and mindfulness. I'm seeing the parents wanting to teach their children this. Um, and I certainly, in the network of, sometimes I don't know if I'm just talking in my own echo chamber, right? But in the network of people who have been trained as end of life caregivers through a Buddhist perspective, which is, I think, what you're referring to with my training with Metta, the Metta Institute with Frank Oseski. Um, yes, mindfulness, becoming truly present to this moment, which is what we look for in any of our helping professions. We want to be present in this moment. And with all the scattered fears and anxieties and chaos of COVID, or any end of life or long-term care situation. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of like, am I the daughter? Am I the nurse? I have to get this medication. I just want to be here with my mom and take care of her. How do we get present? Well, learning some mindfulness, how to breathe, how to connect with your body, how to connect with the earth, how to connect with your breath can help us come back to this moment and see what's just right in front of us right now. What really would be of service now? And that's very, very helpful in these chaotic times. At the Metta Institute, Franco Staszewski has a fabulous book called The Five Invitations, which I recommend to anyone, regardless of your faith background. Frank was co-founder of the Zen Hospice Center in San Francisco during the peak of the AIDS crisis and cared for 1,000 people easily at the bedside. And his lessons of what he learned, he's brought to his teaching throughout the years through Metta Institute, and now is put in this book that I give as gifts all the time. But because it has some basic principles in it that it makes a better life for us when we consider, don't wait. That's his first precept, his first teaching. Don't wait. Don't wait to go and call and say, I need to talk to you and talk about this thing that's between us, and I want to make it better. I want to see if we can get through this with love and compassion. Also, don't wait. Don't be sitting around waiting for something else to happen. There is what's happening right now in this moment. Don't be waiting for someone to die. Don't be waiting for it to get worse or for it to get better. Be with what is. The second principle that I just love is welcome everything. Push nothing away. I mean, if you've cared for a loved one with dementia or Alzheimer's over many years, welcome everything, like that question again, or that welcome this change, or this like, I can't believe it. Who is this person? They used to be someone I knew and loved. Welcome everything, push nothing away. Because when we can actually welcome it, we can see it for what it is and be curious about it and meet it. When we keep wanting it to be something else or just not be this way, we suffer. We suffer terribly when we want it to be different than the way that it is. This COVID stuff right now, we don't welcome the fact that people are sick. But if we push it away and say, oh, it's not that bad, I don't really have to participate in this, it's only making it worse and we're suffering more, right? And the one that probably pertains most to this moment and to caretaking is find peace in the midst of things. Find a place of peace in the midst of things. So if suddenly stuff is hitting the fan, and sometimes that can be literal in a caretaking situation, right? How can you find a way to ground yourself just in that moment and say, I have what I need to meet this challenge. I have it. Take a breath, be with what's in front of you, and be present. And you can't fix it all. You can't fix it all. Sometimes the best you can do is just clean up the mess.
Sometimes the best you can do is just be there.
If I have any regret in caring for my mother in the last 3 months of her life, because I have a nursing background, a lot of times I made myself be the person who managed care. Make sure all the stuff was there and all the equipment and the medications and everything was being done. And there were hours, days perhaps, where I forgot to just be there and be the daughter and be with my mom.
It's very difficult, and it's more difficult because I lived this with my mom. It's more difficult for those of us who are in helping professions and used to, and I think clergy has a challenge with it, and used to like taking control and really knowing what to do because we studied it and we've done it. And then when it's our own family, the best advice I ever got when I call it crash, when my mom crashed, was the social worker at a hospital pulled me aside and said, basically, said, look, you're not the rabbi here. You're her son. Be her son. She doesn't need you to be the rabbi. She needs you to be her son. Just like your experience. And I've shared that with a bunch because it was the best piece of advice in that moment because they had people who knew what to do. it's in a crazy time. And Rosemary, thank you very, very much for all your work with the Conversation Project, and just stay healthy and continued success, and just be well. And thank you for all you've done and will do in helping to raise this wonderful idea of just talking and just not being afraid to talk about just our life. It's life. It's life. So thank you very, very much. You be good. Take care of yourself. Stay healthy. To all of you, again, thank you for listening to today's edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast of Jewish Sacred Aging. Reminder again that you can follow us on our webpage, jewishsacredaging.com, as well as visiting us on the Facebook page, Jewish Sacred Aging on Facebook. We appreciate your support. If you'd like to make a tax-free donation to help further the work of Jewish Sacred Aging and these podcasts, please go to the website, the homepage, and click on the donate button. If you'd like to make a suggestion or comment for future podcasts, just email me at rabbiaddress@jewishsacredaging.com. We want to thank our producer, Steve Lubetkin, and the fact that these podcasts are recorded at the studios of Lubetkin Global Media in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Again, my thanks for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Seekers of Meaning, the podcast of Jewish Sacred Aging. Todah and Shalom.